Hi class, in this video, I'm going to be going over our topic 5 assignment, which is titled Questioning Strategies. For this assignment, you are continuing to use the template that we have used in topic 2 and topic 4 assignments. We're now doing part 3 of the template. So when we look at the template at the very top, we had already identified our grade level and our standards and objectives. Now we're scrolling all the way down to part 3. And we're going to do the questioning strategies portion. For this assignment, what you'll have to do is develop questions that are related to that standard and learning objective. And then you will use Webb's depth of knowledge levels to develop different levels of rigor for each of your questions in each of the 5 E's. So you will identify level 1's questions that you can ask when you're engaging students. Refer back to the activities that you put here. So let's see what I put for my engage. I said students are going to listen to a clip of an orchestra, and maybe I didn't finish this in my example, but they're listening to the orchestra and maybe identifying the sounds that they heard. So I can use that to help me think of questions at each level that I can ask students while they're doing that activity. So make sure you're connecting these things that you wrote above to now the questions you're writing here below. All right, let's go ahead and jump into some of the resources you can use to help you understand each of the DOK levels and what they look like in a science classroom. So first, you'll notice that we do have some resources over here on our Webb's Depth of Knowledge guide. And that's this here when I open that link. This is going to be a really helpful resource for you as you're thinking through your questions. You can see that there is a page or pages for each of the 4 levels. So you can understand what those levels are and what they might look like in practice. All right, so here's our level 1. In a level 1, we have recall and reproduction. So this is just basic knowledge and skills. Basic recall of information often includes your vocabulary terms, and there's not much critical thinking or problem solving or extending information, but like what are vibrations? That's just recall of a term, okay? So it tells you things that students could do, good verbs or products that students might do. So they might just give a definition, or they might just give an example of something. It's just very basic. You can see what the teacher's role is. You're showing, you're demonstrating, you're telling, and the student's just responding, explaining or describing something. And then they give you some potential activities that would fall as a level 1. You're not developing activities, you are developing questions. So I wanted to show you a few other resources that I have that I like. Next is this, and I always post this in our discussion forums as one of the resources I share when we talk about questioning. So if you're not sure, you can either go back to the forums and look for my posts on DOK and resources. So it shows recalling information, DOK1, and then it gives some key concepts. They'll identify, they'll recall, they either know the answer or not. There's nothing to be figured out or solved in the DOK1. Then it shows, going beyond recall, students are starting to make decisions about how we approach and solve problems. The DOK3, they're doing multi-step tasks, they're justifying responses, they're explaining their thinking. So it's getting a lot more, not just, hey, I have to solve a problem, but I have to explain why I think this is the way to solve it. And then 4, extended thinking. So we're going above and beyond. We're making connections to things that we learned and relating them in a different way. So let's go ahead and look back at our chart. And I'm thinking about my standard with vibrations and music. One thing I might ask students, I probably wouldn't ask them in the engage phase because I want them to explore this idea of sounds are made from vibrations. That's the big idea I'm trying to get kids to. So I wouldn't ask them in the engage phase, what are vibrations? But that would be a good time in the explains phase. What are vibrations? Because in the explain phase, this is where your teaching happens. So I put a question, I might define what vibrations are in my explain phase. Or I might decide, this is a question that I want them to have by the end when I'm evaluating. Okay. An engage question might be, where do you hear sounds? There's not a lot of problem solving here. Not a lot going on, just basic recall. Where do you hear sounds? Okay, and you'll come up with a DOK1 for each of those parts. Let me give you an example of a DOK, let's say in our explore phase. That's my favorite phase. And then that might be something like, what do you notice if I was having students use things like a ruler at the end of the desk and they hit it so it then vibrates and makes that wang sound? So what do you notice about the ruler when you hit it? So I would want them to be noticing sound comes out. I would want them to notice the moving and the shaking or the vibrations, because I'm trying to lead them to that. So there's a little problem solving there, but there's not really this deeper level, the multi-step, justifying their thinking. At level 3 might be something like, where do sounds, okay, where do you think sounds come from? And what evidence do you have to support that claim? So after they did their exploration, this would be a great time to ask this question in the explain phase, because students can share what they explored. And then this is where they're coming to conclusions, and you come in after their discussion about their exploration and do the actual teaching. And so students might say there's something to do with this moving and shaking. And that's when I say, oh, you mean vibrations. I teach the term vibrations, and then we see if they all believe that these vibrations are causing sound, and then I teach it. Yeah, you're right. Vibrations come from sound. Now, DOK4 is the hardest one to develop because it requires this connecting and relating ideas, analyzing data. It's open-ended tasks. It requires complex thought. So these ones are a lot harder for students. I think sometimes they're even hard for me to develop in some of the phases, like in the engage phase, really not having a ton of students, doing these complex tasks. Oh, there's me and my stepdaughter. I'm not having students do these complex tasks, but I'm just like trying to get that background information. So sometimes in the engage phase, you really do have to push yourself. So think maybe about how something they've applied in their real life. So have you ever played an instrument? Explain how the instrument made sound, something like that. That's not quite to a level 4. Instrument made sound, and then maybe they would want to apply it to something else. So could you make an instrument with, I don't know, sticks? So thinking about, they might not know how the instrument made sound, but they could say it was a flute. I blew through it, or a recorder, I blew through it. Okay, well, could you make an instrument using sticks? And they could either say, well, yeah, because it would make noise, or no, and they would have to justify it. So it's taking this information they already have and applying it to something else. Now, I might, in the explore phase, have students do something like, or the elaborate phase, let's do elaborate. Have students create their own musical instruments, a little engineering design here. So now we learned they come from vibrations. So now in elaborate, you might have them How can you make an instrument from recycled materials that plays more than one sound? That's going to get us to a deeper level where we see students are extending ideas. It's open-ended. I'll have them actually create it from recycled materials. They're going to have some thought there, and they're connecting and relating ideas. So you'll develop questions for each of those boxes, and then you do not have to do any citations on any of this. It looks like, go back to the assignment just to make sure. It's not required, but if you do like take a specific exact word for word question that you got from someone else, please do cite that. That way you don't get tagged for plagiarism or a high similarity score. Make sure, as always, you read your rubric so you know how you will be graded. And it looks like it's a pretty simple rubric this time. If you're expertly using those depths of knowledge levels, and then is your question aligned to your objective? Is it activating prior knowledge and encouraging problem solving? And then just your mechanics. So not too many graded areas this week. If you have any questions about your assignment, don't hesitate to reach out.